The Narcissist, Reading You, Part 1. When you're involved with the narcissist, you are being read. The narcissist, in effect, is scanning you. Or, perhaps more accurately, the narcissism, like some app running in the background, is watching you and her and him and them to ascertain that you're under control. If it detects threats to control, then the narcissism galvanizes the narcissist through a combination of the creation of a feeling, often fury, as it might be envy, hatred, jealousy, infatuation, and certain thoughts which may utilize the truth, or a half-truth, or be nowhere near the truth. But the point is that that combination of feeling and thought are created to galvanize the narcissist into action, to then nullify the threat to control and maintain control over you and her and him and them. It will also seek to draw the lifeblood of the narcissist from her and him and them and you by way of fuel. It may also motivate the acquisition of character traits and, of course, those all-important residual benefits. To do this, the narcissist must be reading you, scrutinizing you, observing you. Much of this takes place instinctively and unconsciously. The narcissist is not sat there regarding you consciously thinking, are they under control? But for the most part, because the majority of narcissists are unaware, the narcissism is doing it on their behalf, looking for those signs of dissent, for treachery, for some form of revolt. The extent to which they manage it effectively varies. More evolved narcissists, the greater and the ultra, are consciously watching you, both in terms of ensuring that you're under control and providing fuel, etc., but also watching you to learn from you, to see the way that you respond in certain situations, to make a note as to whether that should be used again against you at a future point or discarded as not effective. You're watched because the narcissist may utilize the way that you behave, the things that you say, the way that you respond, and log that as part of the imitation game. Watch that video. It's very important. More evolved narcissists are brilliant at reading you, in terms of understanding what's going on inside your mind, as given away by the little micro-expressions that you engage in. This is not intuitive to us. We have learned it as a consequence of the way that we have evolved and the way that we have scrutinized your similar individuals over time. We're born, or rather we are blessed with a degree of ability with regard to reading people, but it's honed and enhanced and polished and fashioned through use, so that we become better and better at recognizing what's really going on beneath the surface with you. It's important for us to do so that we can maintain that form of control over you by understanding you as the enemy. We better know how to deploy our manipulations against both you and those similar to you. We learn from those past relationships of reading you, and then we can utilize that in more current relationships. We see where weakness is being demonstrated. We see where there is a moment of hesitation, of apprehension, where the anxiety is forming. We not only read these things and understand them so that we can respond appropriately for the purposes of fitting in more effectively, but also then of knowing where the chinks are in your armor, of knowing where we can strike in order to ensure that you remain beholden to us. But those are the more evolved narcissists, and lesser narcissists in particular, are actually notoriously poor at reading body language and facial expressions. This is something that many people who've dealt with lesser narcissists report. Mid-rangers, they still have their problems, but less so compared to the lessers. It's the case that in many instances, the lesser and possibly mid-range narcissists will read neutral facial expressions as hostile or threatening to control. This is often the case because, as you know from my other work, that a narcissist is created as a consequence of a genetic predisposition towards narcissism, i.e., a parent or sometimes a grandparent or great-grandparent is a narcissist themselves, combined with a lack of control environment. And where there is that narcissistic parent involved, that impacts not only upon the formation of the narcissist, but also their abilities with regard to the recognition of body language and facial expression. In nearly all instances where the parent is a narcissist, their communication with the child will have been confusing. Their body language, their facial expressions, their tone and other nonverbal communications would not have lined up with what they were actually saying because of the miscommunication that occurs. This then means that the child, as part of forming towards a narcissist because of their lack of control environment, also becomes unable to understand or read these cues accurately, or ends up distrusting them and viewing them as a threat to control. It becomes ingrained in the narcissist that people never say what they really feel or what they really mean. And therefore, once that narcissist becomes an adult, they are left with an impaired system for trying to determine whether somebody should be trusted, whether they should be relied upon, whether something is as it seems. And instead, it is replaced by a lack of trust and a hypersensitivity to threats to control. It is just a safer option to have that hypervigilance to assume that everybody behaves in that way, and therefore the narcissist will not be caught off guard. By having this paranoia generated in their reading of people, it is better for them to assume that the person is up to no good, that they're engaged in skullduggery, that they're trying to fool the narcissist, thus the narcissist will not be caught off guard. And, if they're not caught off guard, the narcissist cannot be hurt. And thus, whilst the narcissist does not behave in a conscious way of thinking, as a result of the way that I grew up, I don't end up trusting anybody because I want to ensure that I'm not fooled, then narcissism operates that way. What then happens, of course, is the collateral consequence, that as the narcissist reads you, and where lesser and sometimes mid-range misunderstands what you're saying and what you are doing by way of body language and facial expression, so that your activity is viewed as a potential threat, the narcissist then behaves in a way which causes people to actually reject and abandon them. This is because people eventually become fed up of being accused of being liars, being accused of cheating, being suggested that they're an abuser. They often, of course, hang in there for far longer, resulting in them being disengaged from first. But that is again one of the collateral consequences of the behavior of the narcissist, that they end up destroying the very relationship they believe that they're trying to preserve. Those individuals tire of saying that I'm on the same side as you. Those individuals tire of being forced to jump through the hurdles to prove that they can be trusted. Accordingly, what then happens is that where that individual stops responding in a particular way, or in some instances escapes, this just then solidifies in the mind of the narcissist that this person was not to be trusted in the first instance. It thus becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. And thus those narcissists that struggle to read people effectively as a consequence of lower cognitive function and the way that they have had the impact of a narcissist parent impose upon them, end up with misinterpreting the behaviors of their victims to see them as repeated threats to control. And thus their reading of those individuals becomes skewed. I will continue in part 2, explaining more about the way that the narcissist reads you, and in particular, the failings of the lesser and mid-range narcissists.